What if the orphan who built a billion-dollar company found out his own board was planning to kill him at the celebration party? Before we dive into this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next tales of power, betrayal, and the quiet courage that changes everything. Jonathan Rains watched the city from his glass box in the sky. 30 floors down, New York moved in lines and pulses. Cars slid along wet streets, tiny signals in a giant circuit. Steam rose from vents, headlights blurred. From this height, that all looked controllable, manageable, small. On his desk, under the soft white light of a designer lamp, a headline glowed on his laptop. Heliosite IPO soars, from orphan to tech messiah. They'd chosen that word orphan because it made good copy, because it made him look like a miracle instead of an anomaly. He let them. A miracle was easier to market than the truth. His phone buzzed. A new email slid into his inbox, tagged in red. From compliance subject, urgent. Futures fund irregularities action required. He clicked. The email was long. Screenshots, tables, attached PDFs. Words like embezzlement, shell entities, criminal exposure stood out in bold. Near the bottom, a line made his stomach tighten. Please note similar concerns were raised 18 months ago and closed without further action. Per your direction. See attached chain? He opened the attachment. There it was, an old message, his own reply staring back at him. We cannot afford delays right now. Minimal risk. Revisit after roadshow. He remembered the room he'd been in when he typed that. The way his head had ached. The way the walls had seemed to lean in with every investor call. He told himself they'd fix it later. After the roadshow, after the IPA, after. Later had a way of never arriving. The city lights flickered below. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, eyes closed for a brief second. He was back in another building. Another window, 13 years old, sitting on a plastic chair in a group home, watching other kids get picked up for weekends and holidays while he stayed behind. His world then had been a narrow line between nobody and nobody. He had promised himself that if he ever got out, he would never go back to being invisible. He would never lose what he built. He would not be the boy who watched life happen to other people through glass. Now he was the man behind the glass, holding an email that said minimal risk under his name. The clock in the corner of his laptop said 4:12 p.m. The gala started at 7. He closed the email. He marked it unread, as if that could erase the fact that he'd read it at all. After tonight, he whispered to himself. Later, he stood, straightened the cuffs of his shirt, and went to get ready to tell a room full of important people how transparent and honest his company was. On the opposite side of the city, in a basement room that smelled like cleaning chemicals and old coffee, Aurora Lane adjusted the collar of her black uniform. The mirror over the sink was cracked, but it reflected enough. Dark hair pulled back, sleepless shadows under her eyes, a mouth that had learned to smile for tips even when her feet were bleeding inside cheap shoes. Behind her, on a battered couch, Maya swung her legs. The little girl's pink dress flared around her knees. She'd gotten the dress at a thrift store and loved it as if it were spun from silk. And, is it going to be long? Maya asked. It's always long, Aurora said, softening her tone with a quick grin. But I'll come back and check on you when I can. Remember the rules. Maya sighed, reciting. Don't open the door unless it's you. Don't touch the stove. Don't tell anyone I'm here except Mrs. Diaz. Exactly. Aurora knelt, smoothing a wrinkle from Maya's dress. Your homework's in the bag. And snacks. But not too many, or you'll be bouncing off the walls when it's time to sleep. Maya giggled. Mom wouldn't let me have snacks, she said. She said sugar makes people tell the truth. Aurora's smile faltered for a second, and Mom said a lot of things, she said quietly. Some of them were right. Her mother's face flashed in her mind. Not the way she looked at the end. In the hospital thin, defeated, but on the day she'd stood in front of microphones at a press conference, hands shaking as she talked about missing pension funds and falsified reports. They'd called her a liar, bitter, crazy. The lawsuit had vanished in a tangle of corporate lawyers. Her job had gone, the bills had stayed, so had the whispers. Aurora had watched it all as a teenager, helpless, furious, terrified. She'd learned that telling the truth could ruin you. She'd also learned that not telling it could ruin you in a different way. She kissed Maya's forehead. "I'll be back," she promised. "Stay here. Stay safe." She pushed open the staff room door and stepped into the buzzing hallway of the Waldorf. The contrast always jarred her. Inside the staff area, peeling paint, buzzing lights, the clatter of dishes and the bark of managers. Beyond the swinging doors, crystal, polished marble, the soft hum of rich people pretending the world was under control. Lane, the floor manager, called, thrusting a tray piled with fluted glasses into her hands. "Table 12, VIP. Don't trip, don't spill, don't talk." "Got it," Aurora said. The glasses vibrated slightly as she moved, clinking together, echoing in her bones. The ballroom was a dream someone had poured money into. Chandeliers hung in tiers, dripping light. Servers in black uniforms moved like shadows around the edges. The air smelled of perfume and expensive liquor. At the far end, a massive screen bore the Heliosite logo. Beneath it, Jonathan Rain stood at a podium, illuminated in flattering golden light. Aurora had seen his face on the news, on magazine covers, on the home screen of people's phones. Here, in person, he looked both more and less than the photos. Taller, tired, lined in ways makeup couldn't quite blur. When you grow up in a place where no one knows your name, he was saying, you learn to listen for the moments when the world changes because someone decided it should. I built Heliosite to be part of those moments, to take the dark corners and flood them with light. The room applauded. Aurora moved along the row of tables, keeping her eyes on the tray. She passed venture capitalists, bankers, politicians. Their laughter washed over her, thick and easy. She slipped through a side door into a narrower corridor reserved for staff. The carpet disappeared. The lighting went harsh and fluorescent. Stacks of folded linens and boxes of champagne flanked the walls. She was 3 steps from the pantry when she heard voices around the corner. "He thinks he's untouchable now," a man said, amused. "It's almost cute." Another voice answered, smoother, older. Aurora recognized it from television interviews. Richard Coburn. "Cute is expensive at this level," Coburn said. "He was useful when he stayed in his lane. Now he wants to dig around in the plumbing and cry foul when he finds what's been flowing through it." Aurora froze. Her grip tightened on the tray. "He sent me a message this morning," Coburn continued, "full of righteous outrage about irregularities in the futures fund. Talked about going to the full board. If he does that, it's not just his name on the paperwork." So what a third man asked. He's not going to tank his own company. That's all he has. He came from nothing, Coburn said. Men like that cling hard. But sometimes the fear of losing what you've built makes you do surprising things. There was the soft pop of a cork. Aurora eased closer, pressing herself against a stack of chairs, careful not to rattle the glasses. "We give him what he wants," Coburn said. "A last big toast, a story about him working too hard, caring too much. Tragic, but not unexpected. People will sympathize, investors will rally, and will quietly make sure the mess gets swept up by people whose names aren't on the front of every article." Aurora's heart slammed against her ribs. He was talking about killing him, not in so many words, but she heard it, clear as if he'd said poison. Her mind jumped to Maya, alone in the staff room, to her mother standing at a podium, hands shaking, voice cracking as she tried to tell people that something they didn't want to hear. She should walk away. That was the sensible choice. Walk away, keep the job, keep Maya in school and in that tiny, barely affordable apartment. Let the rich fight their bloody little wars without dragging her into it. But the words her mother had leaned down and whispered to her, once when she was small and confused, floated up. "If something's wrong and you see it," she'd said, "you're already in it." Return the tray. Serve the drinks. Let the man die. Or do something. Aurora closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them, her decision had settled somewhere deep in her chest. Shaking but solid, she backed away, the tray rattling. She found a corner, set it down, grabbed a linen napkin and a pen from her apron. Her hand trembled so badly it was hard to form letters, but she forced the words out, ugly and slanted. Don't drink. Leave now. They know you found out about the fund. She folded the napkin, tucked it into the cuff of her sleeve, picked up the tray again, and walked back into the glow of the ballroom. The special bottle had its own entrance. Somebody from the staff, someone higher up than Aurora carried it in, label turned deliberately toward the cameras. Vintage, imported, very rare. The sort of detail people wrote about in profiles. One glass, poured with care, placed at Jonathan's place at the head table. Aurora's path took her close. Her pulse roared in her ears. She veered slightly, enough that her tray clipped the back of a chair. The impact set the empty glasses jittering. One tipped, then dominoed into the next, knocking them into each other and then into the table. Crystal shattered. Champagne blossomed across white linen. The poisoned glass tipped and fell, spraying its contents harmlessly across the floor before breaking into glittering shards. For an instant, there was silence. Then the room reacted all at once. "Oh, careful!" Someone cursed under their breath. Someone laughed nervously. A manager started towards her, fury in his eyes. I'm so sorry," Aurora stammered, cheeks burning. "I tripped." "Oh." Jonathan Rains turned to her, up close. His eyes were a dark gray, ringed with fatigue. He should have been angry. He should have snapped his fingers and had her escorted out. Instead, he did something stranger. "It's just glass," he said, voice smooth, caring just enough to reassure the people nearest. No harm done. His hand reached out, ostensibly to steady the tray. As his fingers brushed hers, she slid the folded napkin into his palm. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. He closed his hand around the linen. "Let's get out of the spotlight," he said, still smiling for the guests. "Looks like we both need a moment to breathe." Before anyone could object, he rose, placed a guiding hand at the small of her back, and steered her away from the table. The jazz band, quick on the uptake, shifted into a slow tune. People assumed he was being charming, smoothing over a staff member's mistake with a quick dance. They assumed a lot of things. On the dance floor, under the watchful eyes of donors and cameras, Jonathan took her hand. "Keep your face relaxed," he murmured without moving his lips. He unfolded the napkin with his other hand, his palm hidden between their bodies. His eyes scanned the words. His expression didn't change, but something in his gaze hardened. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "Aurora," she whispered. "Waitress." "Nobody. Not tonight," he said. He glanced past her, to where Coburn watched from the head table, a tight, amused smile on his face. "I've been waiting for this," Jonathan said. She stared at him. "You knew," she breathed, "about the fun." "I've known something was off for a while," he said. "Today I saw enough to know it's not a rounding error. I told them I was bringing it to the full board this week, and they told you," what she asked. His hand tightened. "Just a fraction. That I was overreacting." He said, "That timing is everything. That we couldn't jeopardize our momentum over a few messy lines in a ledger." Aurora thought of the word in the email. Minimal. "Why didn't you go anyway?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Because I've spent my whole life terrified of burning down the only thing that got me out," he said. "Because the boy who watched life happen to him through glass still lives in my head, telling me to play it safe. Because I told myself I'd fix it later." He let out a breath. "I don't get to say later anymore, do I?" he added. "No," Aurora said softly. "You don't." He spun her gently, using the movement to guide them toward the side door. "Do you have anyone here with you?" he asked. "My sister," she said. "Maya. She's 6. She's in the staff room downstairs. She doesn't know anything. She waits for me. Then we get her," he said. and we get out. The music blurred behind them as they slipped through the staff door. The carpet gave way to scuffed tile. The air cooled. The sounds shifted from laughter and clinking glasses to the clatter of dishes and the hiss of steam. They moved quickly, but not so quickly it looked like running. In the narrow hallway leading to the staff area, Aurora spoke in a low voice, her words tumbling. "I heard them," she said. "In the back, near the pantry, Coburn and some others. They talked about giving you a story everyone could accept. Stress, exhaustion. I think they actually did something to that drink." Jonathan swallowed. "I believe you," he said. "That doesn't scare you more?" she asked. "It terrifies me," he said. "I'm just used to being terrified. Comes with the job." They reached the staff room door. Aurora pushed it open. Maya looked up from the book spread across her knees. "Rory," she said, relief flooding her face. Then she saw Jonathan behind her sister and froze, eyes wide. "You're the guy from the TV," she said. Jonathan smiled, a little awkward. "Guilty," he said. "Can I borrow your sister for a bit?" Maya's brow furrowed. "Are bad people doing to you what they did to Mom?" she asked. Aurora flinched. "Maya," she started. Jonathan crouched down so he was eye level with the little girl. "Some people did some bad things around me," he said. "I helped them by pretending I didn't see. I'm trying to stop doing that." Maya studied him with solemn seriousness. "Mom said, if something's wrong and you see it, you're already in it," she said. Jonathan closed his eyes briefly. "Your mom was right," he said. Aurora grabbed Maya's backpack, shoved the book inside, then helped her into her coat. "We're leaving." "Okay," she told her. "We're going somewhere safer." "Safer than a hotel?" Maya asked, skeptical. "For once." "Yeah," Aurora said. "Come on." They slipped out through the service exit into a narrow alley. Dumpsters lined one side. The air smelled of rain and old food. A black car waited at the curb, engine idling. The driver, a man in a dark cap, looked up as the door opened. "Everything all right, Mr. Rains?" he asked. "No," Jonathan said, "but get us out of here anyway." Jonathan's apartment was not what Aurora expected. No walls of glass, no spiral staircase, no marble kitchen island the size of her entire living room. It was nice, spacious by her standards, but it was normal. Bookshelves, full and cluttered, a sagging couch with a knitted throw, a bike propped near the door, prints on the walls instead of original art. Maya turned in a slow circle, eyes wide. "Where's your butler?" she whispered. "I can barely handle having a driver," Jonathan said. "A butler would break me." He locked the door behind them, then crossed to a dark metal cabinet bolted to the wall. He tapped in a code, opened it, and pulled out a thick folder in a small, black external drive. "All right," he said. "Let's look at the mess." Aurora tucked Maya under the throw blanket on the couch, put on a cartoon with the volume low, then joined him at the table. He spread the documents out. Flowcharts, bank statements, emails, a neat, ugly pattern of money moving in ways it was never meant to. Funds siphoned from Heliosite's futures fund money that was supposed to go to schools, devices, training rerouted through shell companies and into places with no clear purpose. Names popped up, Coburn's. Others she didn't recognize. "How long has this been going on?" Aurora asked. "At least 2 years," Jonathan said. "The first time someone flagged something, it was small. A few invoices that didn't match the service. That email you saw." He tapped the chain at the bottom of the stack. "That's when I told them to stand down," he said. He didn't look at her as he spoke. His voice was flat, as if reading a confession aloud to himself. "I told myself I was protecting the company," he said. "We were 2 weeks from a make-or-break roadshow. I thought, if we survive this, if we get through the IPO, I'll have the leverage to fix everything." "And did you?" she asked. "Clearly not," he said, with a bitter little smile. "The more we grew, the more people like Coburn used words like timing and optics whenever I brought this up. And the more I let them." He finally looked up. "There's this story people tell about guys like me," he said. that we're brave, that we took risks no one else would. What they don't say is that sometimes we take the wrong ones. We sugarcoat our fear and call it strategy. Aurora thought of her mother, sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers and a look of grim determination, saying, "If I don't say anything, I'm as bad as they are." She thought of how that had ended. "You sound like them," she said quietly. The ones who ignored her, the ones who said, "Not now, and it's complicated, and we'll revisit later." He flinched. "Yeah," he said, "I do." In the living room, Maya laughed at something on the cartoon. The sound floated around the edges of the conversation, a soft reminder that other lives existed outside these papers. Jonathan rubbed his eyes. "I'm not asking you to trust me, ma'am," he said. "I'm asking you not to let them finish what they started. You already put yourself in the line of fire once tonight. If they realize you heard them, you'll need more than my apology." "And if I walk away," she asked, "then they tell the story they want," he said. "They kill me or not, now that we've ruined their theater and they call me corrupt. They make themselves the saviors. The money keeps disappearing. And you get to sleep at night knowing you didn't make it worse for yourself." "Do you sleep at night?" she asked. He laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Not anymore," he said. The clock on the wall ticked. For a moment, the world shrank to the pool of light around the table, the rustle of paper, the slow rise and fall of Maya's breathing in the next room. Aurora stared at her hands. "My mom did what you're thinking about doing," she said. She blew the whistle. They painted her as crazy. She lost everything. We lost everything. And it didn't even work. The company paid a fine nobody remembers and moved on. "I'm sorry," Jonathan said. "Don't be sorry," she replied. "Be better than the people who made her regret it." He held her gaze. "You could still walk away," he said. "You have a 6-year-old asleep on my couch. You didn't choose this fight." Aurora thought of the hallway, the champagne, the napkin in his hand. She thought of Maya's question, "Are bad people doing to you what they did to Mom?" "If something's wrong and you see it," she said almost to herself, "you're already in it." She sighed. "Call your friend," she said. The detective. Mark Dalton arrived with the smell of rain and old coffee. He was in his mid-40s, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of city grit. His eyes were tired but sharp. "So this is the legendary Rains," he said, dropping into a chair without waiting to be invited. "And the waitress who ruined a very fine vintage." "Mark," Jonathan said, "this is Aurora, and that's her sister, Maya." Maya peeked over the back of the couch, waved, then ducked again. Mark gave her a little salute, then focused on the papers. "Heliosite Futures Fund," he read. "I've seen some creative charity books in my time, but this is ambitious." He flipped pages, scanned emails, skimmed the summary Aurora had scribbled on a notepad. "You've got enough here to give a prosecutor a nervous breakdown," he said, "and enough to make your board very interested in seeing you disappear." "We figured that out," Jonathan said. "What we don't know is how to make sure they don't rewrite the script." Mark leaned back, folding his arms. "You know how this goes," he said. "Power protects itself. They'll frame this as brilliant but flawed founder goes too far. Board heroically steps in. You'll be the villain of your own company's origin story." "And if we get ahead of them," Aurora asked. "Then you bleed on camera," Mark said. "You tell the truth before they do. All of it, including the part where you sat on your hands 18 months ago." Jonathan's jaw clenched. "You're not helping your friend here," Aurora said. "I'm not here to help him," Mark replied. "I'm here to help the truth. If those two things happen to line up, great." He tapped the stack of pages. "You want a fighting chance," he said. "We need 2 things evidence the board knew, and proof they plan to use you as the fall guy." "How?" Jonathan asked. "We get them to say it," Mark said, "in a room they think is safe, while you're missing." Aurora frowned. "I'm invisible to them," she said slowly. "They don't see staff unless we spill something." Mark smiled, thin and sharp. "Exactly," he said. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the next morning. Officially, it was about post-IPO strategic alignment. Unofficially, It was about what to do with a CEO who had seen too much. Coburn sat at the head of the table, a half-drunk cup of coffee in front of him. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind him showed the city in bright, cold clarity. Other directors filed in, checking their phones, muttering about stock prices and headlines. "Any word from Jonathan?" one asked. "He's taking wine," Coburn said. "Stress, exhaustion, that's our narrative. Let's make sure we all understand it." The door opened. Aurora walked in with a tray of coffee cups. She kept her gaze fixed on the table, her posture slightly hunched. "Refreshments," she murmured. No one questioned why a hotel waitress was serving drinks in a corporate boardroom. They saw the uniform, the tray, and nothing else. She moved around the table, placing cups. As she set the tray down in the center, the tiny microphone taped to its underside caught every word, sending them down to the van parked in the underground garage. In the van, Mark adjusted his headphones, eyes narrowed. Next to him, Jonathan leaned forward, fingers digging into his knees. "We can't let him dictate terms," one director said up in the boardroom. "He signed off on those disbursements. We all did," another replied. "But his name is bigger," Coburn said. "Bigger names make bigger targets. We don't have to tell a lie. We simply emphasize certain truths. Charismatic founder hides misuse of charitable funds to chase IPO dream. Board discovers. Cooperates fully with authorities. It practically writes itself. And if he goes to the press first," someone asked. Coburn's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then we remind them he had this information 18 months ago and did nothing." He said, "We paint a picture of a brilliant man undone by hubris. The public loves that arc. They'll forget the rest." In the van, Jonathan's face drained of color. "That's exactly what I would have done," he whispered. A year ago, Aurora placed the last cup, then stepped back. Hands clasped. Coburn glanced at her, then away. "She might as well have been part of the furniture." "Thank you," he said, without looking. She nodded, turned, and left the room. As the door closed behind her, the voices continued. "If he were smart," one director said, "he'd disappear somewhere. Enjoy his money. Let us mop this up." "If he were smart," Coburn replied, "he would have stayed out of the plumbing in the first place." The van's speakers crackled softly as the feed ended. Mark pulled off his headphones. "They're not just willing to sacrifice you," he said. "They've already written the eulogy." Jonathan stared at the floor. He saw the boy at the window again, the one who'd promised himself he'd never let anyone decide his story for him. He stood. "Then we crashed their script," he said. When the board meeting reconvened after a short break, the directors were still arguing about risk profiles and communication strategies. The door opened without a knock. Jonathan stepped in. The room froze. "Well," Coburn said after a beat, recovering his composure, "we were just talking about you." "I know," Jonathan said. He walked to the middle of the room, set a folder and a small black drive on the table. "This is everything," he said. "The audit, the disbursement logs, the emails, including mine, the ones where I told my team to stand down, to call it minimal, to revisit later." Coburn's expression shuddered. "Jonathan," he said smoothly, "this isn't the place." "It's exactly the place," Jonathan said. "Because in about 2 hours, this gets sent to the Department of Justice, the SEC, and a very persistent journalist who already knows more than you'd like." A murmur rippled around the table. "You're destroying yourself," one director said. "I'm telling the truth," Jonathan replied. "If that destroys me, that says more about what I built than I'd like to admit." Coburn leaned back, folding his hands. "You're not the only one whose name is on these pages," he said. "I know," Jonathan said. "Then why stand here alone?" Coburn asked. "Why not fix it quietly? Protect the mission. Protect the company. You claim to care about it." Jonathan thought of the email on his screen, marked unread, of the napkin in his pocket, of Maya's eyes. "I cared about the company more than the people it was supposed to serve," he said. "That's how I ended up in this chair. I'm trying not to make that mistake again." "It's very noble," Coburn said. "But don't kid yourself. They'll eat you alive out there. And we will cooperate fully. We'll express our shock, our deep concern, We'll say we trusted you, that we had no idea. The public loves a contrite board. And if I go out there and say I brought this to you, and you told me to sit on it, Jonathan asked. Coburn's smile thinned. Who will they believe, he asked. The men and women who kept the company afloat? Or the founder who got drunk on his own myth? Silence settled, heavy and suffocating. Jonathan realized, with a clarity that almost hurt, that there was no version of this where he walked away clean. He could minimize, spin, try to hold on to a fraction of the image he'd spent years curating, or he could tell the truth, the whole of it, and let the image burn. He picked up the folder and the drive. I'll see you at the press conference, he said. Backstage, the air smelled of dust and fresh paint. Microphones stood ready. Lights hummed. Somewhere beyond the curtains, reporters shuffled. Cameras adjusted their focus, lenses blinking like mechanical eyes. Aurora paced a narrow corridor, chewing the inside of her cheek. Jonathan stood a few feet away, tie loosened, staring at the notes he hadn't written. You don't have to do it, she said. Yes, he said, I do. But if you tell them everything, she pressed, they'll know the truth, he said. For once, that's the point. He looked at her. You taught me that, he added. She shook her head. My mom taught me that. She said, I just borrowed it. She reached into her bag and pulled out an old, slightly worn business card. A name, a phone number, a newspaper logo. My mom tried to contact him once. She said, back then. He wrote one article. It helped a little. Not enough. But he listened. She had found the card in a box of her mother's things after the funeral. She had kept it for reasons she'd never fully explained to herself. Now, her fingers tightened around it. Jonathan frowned. What are you doing, he asked. What I should have done sooner, she said. She stepped aside, pulled out her phone, opened her email. In a few quick taps, she attached the files Jonathan had shown her, the audit, the logs, the emails, and a copy of the audio Mark had recorded in the van. She stared at the blank subject line for a moment. Then she typed, You once told my mom the truth matters. Here is mine. Her thumb hovered over send. She thought about the hotel, the little apartment, the rent, Maya's tuition. All the ways her life could get harder if this went wrong. Then she saw her mother again, hands shaking over a microphone, voice drowned out by the storm of denial. Aurora hit send. A weight she hadn't realized she was carrying lifted a fraction. Jonathan watched her. You didn't ask me, he said. If I had, would you have said yes, she asked. He hesitated. No, he admitted. Exactly, she said. You've spent your life controlling the narrative. Maybe it's time you don't. He stared at her, then laughed, low and shaky. Control is overrated, he said. A notification pinged on his phone. He glanced at the screen. A news alert from that same newspaper. Breaking sources allege Heliosite charity fund misused. Internal emails suggest cover-up. He read the first few lines. Some of the documents Aurora had just sent were already embedded. They're faster than we were, he murmured. Good, Aurora said. Now you don't get to change your mind. A stage manager poked his head around the corner. Mr. Rains, he said. We're live in 3. Jonathan took a breath. Ready to ruin your life, Mark called from his post against the wall. Already did, Jonathan said. This is the part where I try to make it matter. The lights on the stage were harsher than those in the ballroom. They stripped away flattering shadows, leaving every line, every flaw, exposed. Jonathan walked to the podium. He could feel the cameras tracking him, lenses adjusting. He could feel the eyes of board members in the front row, some cold, some calculating, some genuinely afraid. He set his notes down. They were blank. My name is Jonathan Rains, he said. His voice echoed slightly in the large room. Until a few minutes ago, I was the CEO of Heliosite Technologies. A rustle ran through the crowd. He raised a hand. I'm not here to talk about innovation tonight, he said, or market share, or any of the things we usually talk about in rooms like this. I'm here to talk about something much simpler and much harder. I'm here to talk about what we did when we thought no one was looking. He told them about the Futures Fund, how it had been created to send equipment and training to schools that had been left out of the tech revolution. How, somewhere along the way, it had become a pipe through which money flowed into companies that did nothing, into pockets that didn't need it. He did not name every person involved. That would come later, in courtrooms and hearings. He did name himself. A year and a half ago, members of my own team brought me concerns about irregularities. He said, they recommended a pause on payments and a full, independent audit. I read the report. I listened. And then I told them no. He swallowed. I told them the risk was minimal, that we would revisit the issue after our roadshow. He said, those were my words. They are in my email. No one forced me to write them. The room was so quiet he could hear the faint hum of the lights. I told myself I was protecting the mission. He said, in reality, I was protecting myself. From bad headlines, from a delayed IPO, from the possibility that the thing I built could fall apart. He looked straight into one of the cameras. I became exactly the kind of person I thought I was fighting. He said. He let the sentence sit, heavy and unadorned. When I finally found out how deep the misuse went, I tried to pull the threads quietly. He went on. I told certain members of the board I planned to bring this to regulators. The response I got made it clear that honesty was not the preferred solution. Somewhere in the audience, Coburn's jaw tightened. I am not here to point fingers and pretend I am clean. Jonathan said, I am here to say this whatever happens next. I will not lie for this company. Not to you, not to them, not to the press, not to myself. And I will not stand by while the people who tried to stop this are punished. He took a breath. With that in mind, effective immediately, I am resigning as CEO, he said. I will cooperate fully with federal investigators. I will accept whatever personal and legal consequences come from my role in this. A flurry of murmurs rose, then fell. I am also transferring the majority of my personal equity in Heliosite into an independent trust, he continued. It will be called the Echo Fund. He glanced to the side of the stage, where Aurora stood in the wings, eyes fixed on him. Maya's small hand clutched in hers. The Echo Fund will have two missions, he said. First, to compensate as far as possible those harmed by the misuse of our charitable fund. And second, to support individuals who risk their livelihoods to expose wrongdoing inside powerful institutions. He was careful with his next words. This fund will not be controlled by me, he said, or by our board. It will be governed by a panel of independent advocates and legal experts. My role, if any, will be as an unpaid advisor. A hand shot up in the front row. Why not keep control? A reporter called. You're giving away billions in potential upside because people like me shouldn't be in charge of deciding how much we owe. Jonathan said simply. He turned slightly. Aurora Lane, he said. Would you join me up here? Aurora froze. Maya squeezed her hand. Go, Maya whispered. Aurora walked onto the stage, every step feeling like it belonged to someone else. Jonathan moved aside, making space for her at the microphone. This is Aurora, he said. She worked as a server. She overheard something last night she was never supposed to hear. She had every reason to stay silent, to mind her business, to protect the little she has. Instead, she warned me. Because of her, I am standing here. Cameras pivoted, focused on her. Aurora's throat felt tight. She didn't have a speech. She didn't want one. I didn't do anything special, she managed. I just didn't look away. She stepped back. And this, Jonathan said, nodding toward the edge of the stage, is Maya. Maya hesitated, then clambered up with the help of a stagehand. The oversized lanyard around her neck bounced against her chest. Jonathan crouched to meet her gaze. You told me something your mom used to say, he said, holding the microphone down toward her. Do you remember? Maya nodded, cheeks pink, eyes huge in the spotlight. She said if something is wrong and you see it, Maya said, voice trembling but clear, you're already in it. There was a soft, collective intake of breath. Jonathan straightened. We like to think there are bystanders in these stories, he said. People who are just there, not responsible. But if you benefit from a system that hurts people, and you know, and you stay quiet, you're not a bystander. You're a participant. He glanced at the board members in the front row. I was a participant, he said. I am trying now to be something else. He stepped back from the podium. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. He answered some, declined to answer others, repeated again and again that he would cooperate, that he would not claim ignorance, that he had been wrong. By the time he left the stage, his throat was raw and his palms were slick with sweat. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was facing forward instead of sideways. The world did what it always did with a scandal. It swarmed. There were breaking news banners, pundits yelling at each other in split-screen windows. Think pieces about ethics in tech and the dangers of charismatic founders. There were memes, of course. Cartoons of Jonathan with a halo cracked in half. Regulators opened investigations. Subpoenas went out. Some board members resigned with carefully worded statements about prior commitments. Others were less lucky. One was eventually led down a courthouse hallway in handcuffs, lips pressed into a thin line. Jonathan spent hours in windowless rooms, answering questions under oath. He handed over emails, documents, anything they asked for. His lawyers argued. So did those on the other side of the table. In the end, his cooperation and his confession kept him out of prison. He didn't get off free. Settlements were reached, fines paid. His reputation, once spotless in the eyes of the market, would always carry the stain of that phrase minimal risk and everything that followed. He was barred, for a time, from serving as an officer or director of a public company. The boy who'd become CEO at 30 and thought he'd die in a boardroom had to get used to being something else. Heliosite survived, under new leadership and strict oversight. The Futures Fund was dismantled and rebuilt with guardrails that should have been there all along. The Echo Fund opened its doors in a smaller building across town. Its reception area had secondhand chairs and a coffee machine that sputtered if you pushed the wrong button. On the walls, instead of glossy product shots, there were framed stories from people who had spoken up: nurses, technicians, junior accountants, dock workers. Aurora sat behind a desk most days, answering calls. Echo Fund, this is Aurora, she would say. How can we help? Sometimes the person on the other end would hang up the moment she said the word help. Sometimes they would spill everything in a rush, as if afraid the opportunity would vanish if they paused for breath. She listened. She took notes. She told them the truth. It will be hard, she'd say. You might lose your job. You might get dragged through the mud, but you won't be alone. Not this time. Some hung up anyway. Some didn't. Maya adjusted to a new school. It was better than the old one. Smaller classes. Teachers who actually looked at her when she spoke. Her tuition came partly from a scholarship funded by the Echo Fund. She didn't boast about it, but sometimes when other kids complained about homework, she would quietly draw little stars in the margins of her notebook and think about how lucky she was to even have one. Jonathan came by the office often. He didn't have a title. He didn't want one. He filed. He made coffee. He sat in on meetings with people whose voices shook as they described what they'd seen. He offered them what he wished someone had given his younger self: information. Options. A promise that if they jumped, there would be at least a few hands reaching out. More than once, someone looked at him suspiciously and said, "Aren't you that guy?" He would nod. "I am," he'd say. "That's why I'm here." At night, when the office emptied, he would sit by the window, looking out at a much smaller slice of the city than the one his old office had shown him. The view was mostly brick and a strip of sky. It felt more honest. Spring in New York arrived like an apology. The air softened. Trees along the sidewalks sprouted reluctant green. People shed coats and walked a little slower, as if remembering they had bodies to feel the sun with. One afternoon, Aurora and Jonathan sat on a park bench while Maya ran from swing to slide and back again. The bench was old, metal slats peeling paint, but it held. Jonathan held a paper cup of coffee. Aurora had an ice cream that was slowly losing its fight against gravity. "You ever miss it?" she asked. watching him over the rim of her cup, the stage, the spotlight, being tech messiah or whatever they called you. Sometimes, he admitted. Then I remember standing up there talking about safety and transparency with an email in my pocket that said minimal risk. And I feel sick. He looked out at the playground. Now I get a different kind of stage, he said. Smaller, less glamorous, but the stakes feel more real. Aurora licked a drip of ice cream off her hand. You know you're still a story, Mom. Right, she said. There are articles about you. Some call you brave. Some call you a sellout. Some call you an idiot. I am an idiot, he said lightly. But at least I'm an idiot who knows which side of the line he wants to stand on now. Maya ran over, cheeks flushed. Can I ask something? She panted him. Always, Aurora said. Maya hopped up onto the bench between them. When you told all those people what you did, she frowned, searching for words. Were you scared? Yes, Jonathan said. The answer came without hesitation. I was terrified. But you still did it, she said. He nodded. Sometimes, he said, being brave just means doing the thing even though you're scared. Not instead of being scared, just anyway. Maya mulled that over. Like when I read my story out loud in class, she said, my legs were shaking, but I did it. Exactly like that. He said, She smiled, satisfied, then spotted a friend near the slide and scrambled off the bench. Aurora watched her go, then looked at Jonathan. She's going to grow up thinking this is normal, she said. People telling the truth, paying for what they did, helping each other. Isn't that the point, he asked? She shrugged. Feels fragile, she said, like it could break if we stop paying attention. Then we don't stop, he said. He took a sip of coffee, made a face. This is terrible, he added. She laughed. You used to have someone bring you handcrafted lattes, she said. Now you drink park coffee and spend your days listening to people cry. It's an upgrade, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Is it? He watched Maya, her pink dress a bright spot against the muted playground. I used to think the best thing I could be was untouchable, he said. Above it all, safe. Now I think the best thing I can be is reachable, human, someone who can be wrong and still decide to do the next right thing. Aurora was quiet for a moment. You know, she said, people like the story about you. The headlines, the orphan, the empire, the fall, the echo. But they keep forgetting the part where none of it happens without a waitress and a 6-year-old girl. He smiled, a small curve that reached his eyes. I don't forget, he said, not anymore. He glanced at her. Between you and me, he added, if anyone's the hero in this story, it's the woman who knocked over a glass and wrote on a napkin when she could have walked away. And the kid who sent your mess to a journalist, she said. And the kid, he agreed. The sun slid lower, turning the air golden. Maya's laughter floated back to them, bright and unguarded. For a moment, Jonathan let himself simply sit. No cameras, no boardrooms, no glass walls, just a park, a bench, a girl who refused to be invisible, and a child who believed that if something was wrong and you saw it, you had to try to make it right. He didn't know how long the world would listen, how many stories like his would end with someone stepping up instead of turning away. But he knew this, the echo had started, and sometimes all it took was one small, shaking voice to make others find theirs.